ACR, which stands for American College of Radiology, has accreditation. And a part of this accreditation is so-called phantom. This phantom is used to perform different measurements on the MRI scanner. Simply put, it's a quality control of the equipment, which is scanner in our case. It makes sure that the scanner performs up to standards and produces the high quality images. ACR Phantom is cylindrical. It has two writings on it. Says nose and chin. Those writings are for positioning, and usually Phantom is positioned into the head coil. We use the bubble level to make sure that the positioning inside the coil is right. The color of Phantom is tint greenish color. It contains two things: sodium chloride and nickel chloride. And those two liquids are mimicking the biological conductivity, as if there is a live person inside the coil to perform the measurement. So nickel chloride is actually a trouble. Nickel chloride is very poisonous. So we want to make sure that we handle Phantom at all times very carefully with two hands and make sure we never drop it and the nickel chloride never leaks out. Nickel chloride is extremely poisonous. Unfortunately, it creates enormous safety issue. So in case of emergency, when it leaks, the only people who are allowed to handle it and dispose of it are properly trained personnel with the necessary equipment, special equipment. At all times, nickel chloride has to be treated as a hazardous waste. Quality control tests are usually performed once a week. The numbers go to the department, and if those numbers are not acceptable, the service engineers has to get involved and take care of those things. There are a number of tests that mandated by ARRT. Is a room temperature, cryogen level, equipment inspection, geometric accuracy, and transmitter gain attenuation. Room temperature has to be monitored by staff on a regular basis. Cryogen levels has to be monitored, especially for superconductive scanners, and the industry acceptable number is 75% of cryogen has to be present. If the number goes down, it has to be taken care of as soon as possible. Transmitter gain attenuation is, simply put, the ability of the scanner to know exactly how much RF energy is needed to produce 90-degree flip angle or whatever angle needs to be produced. Equipment inspection is a broad inspection. It includes inspection of coils, cables, monitoring devices, even door seals. And as for geometric accuracy, it's a very important test because scanner has to accurately tell object's height and width within the slice in order to produce quality image. In MRI environment, it is crucial to know the difference between MR safe, MR conditional, and MR unsafe items. MR safe items are usually non-metallic and possess a none or minimal heating potential. We have to remember that we have two major forces to watch out for in MRI scan room. It is B0, which is static magnetic field, and RF, radio frequencies, that tend to heat up things and objects. So MR safe items are labeled as green letters M and R on the white field and surrounded by a green square box. As for MRI conditional items, those are a little bit tricky because there are several conditions applied to them. So those items can be scanned only if several conditions are met. For example, it is important to know in how powerful the magnetic field B0 can be in order for that item, conditional item, to be scanned. For example, some implants and devices can be scanned in 0.0 Tesla scanners, some 1.5 Tesla, and so on and so forth. So with the conditional items, we usually have to check those numbers, B0 and SAR, specific absorption rate and slew rate for those items. And there are ways to do it for us. For example, implants and devices, they come with an implant card where we already have those necessary numbers to check against and see if it's safe to introduce it to our particular scan room. Another way to check for us as a technologist if the conditional implant or object is safe for our particular environment is to go to the internet source, which is a web page, mrisafeoneword.com. And over there we can search by model, make, number, the company who made the device. So that is a crucial piece of information which we can get by going on that website. MRI conditional items are labeled as black letters MR in a yellow field and surrounded by black triangular border. The third kind of items we can encounter is MR unsafe items. Those items could not be introduced in a scan room under any conditions. Usually those are ferrous items and they possess extreme danger to patient and to other people in the scan room. They can work as a projectiles. They can move inside the body, causing damage of the tissue to the point where the person even can die. That is why it is highly unlikely that the procedure could be continued in this case. It's very important to consult with radiologists in these particular cases. MRI, which is MR unsafe items, have their sign. It is black letters MR in a white field surrounded by a red circle and crossed out with a red line. It is extremely important to be on top of things in terms of devices and implants of the patient. So for that, first of all, I would go over the questionnaire the patient already filled out by himself or herself. I would go through every single item on the list and ask questions if something is not clear for me. I will take my time, I will not be rushing, and I will go to the bottom of the things. Oftentimes, patients have cards of their implants. It is very helpful. There are special numbers there, the models, the makes, that tells us and helps us to determine if the item, device, or implant is safe to be scanned in our scanner. However, it's not always the case, and sometimes patient has no idea and cannot answer my questions, so I would simply contact the doctor or the facility that performed the procedure. And it is important to mention that we're talking not just about the procedures of implanting the devices. It's also important to know that then devices are taken out. There's a possibility that some items like wiring would be still left in the patient's body. And the best friend for us here in this situation would be X-ray. That will give us a clear picture what's going on in the patient's body. And the other last resort, I think, would be also radiologist. Those specialists can also help us out in determining if we can proceed with the scanning or not. There are several really dangerous devices, implants I can think of. First of all, those are aneurysm clips. Those are scary things because they are attached to such a fragile parts of the human body as blood vessels that their damage would be pretty much fatal to the patient. Another one would be a pacemaker. Pacemakers are controlling the most important, one of the most important parts of the human body. It's like an engine in the car. It's the heart. So the malfunctioning of the pacemaker or damaging it would cause can cause death. And the third one, I would say it's neurostimulators, because neurostimulators help and support one of the most important systems in the body. It's a central nervous system, and it's just scary to think about the damage that can be done to the body if neurostimulator is malfunctioning or damaged. The most important part here is that those devices are usually, they're conditional. So if they were unsafe, that would be easy for us. We would be just not scanning them. But they're conditional. That means that we still have to do the scan. We can do the scan, but we have to be extremely cautious. We have to check and recheck every single number, every single condition several times. But it's worth it for the sake of the safety of the patient, and it's necessary to be done. The way I would transfer my patient from the wheelchair to the bed. So first of all, I would place wheelchair as close as possible to the bed, and also at the angle so the patient faces the bed a little bit. Then I put down the armrest that is close to the transfer side, and I also make sure that patient's feet are put straight on the ground. At this point, I will ask my patient to go ahead and put his hands on my shoulders, and at the same time I would lock my knees with his knees. The way it's done, my inside of my kneecaps and femur will be touching his outside kneecaps and femur. This position is very important, and it needs to be kept all the way till the end of the transfer. So in this position, now my goal is put my hands underneath the patient, so it would be easier for me to help him to move to the bed. So for that, I ask him to help me out as much as possible. I need to move my hands underneath him. So that would be achieved by just like rocking back and forth a little bit more every time. And at some point, and my hands are touching his ischial tuberosity, it's the most profound bone in that area. I know that we're on the right position. At this point, I'm ready. I ask him on the count of 3 to finish the transfer. So that's how we rock. We're rocking like this: 1, 2, and 3. I finish the transfer. I put the patient on the bed. Now my goal is to kind of move him away from the edge of the bed to make sure he's safer. And for that, I still holding him, and we're making this rocking movements from one side to another side. At the same time, I'm pushing him a little bit further from the edge. At some point, then I see that this is a good position. I'm still locking his knees with my knees, and I'm still holding his back with one of my hands. At the same time, I'm asking him to put his arms and help him out to sit straight himself. And at this point, he does that. I check in the position of our feet. Everything looks good. I unlock my knees, and transfer is finished. Lateral transfer of the patient from one flat surface to another. So from one bed to another bed. So for that, we need a flat sheet, full size, and we need the lateral transfer board. Also, minimum of 3 caregivers are required. That could be more people required if the size of the patient requires that, as well as patient's equipment like tubing that has to be watched and monitored by somebody. So there will be extra people involved. So, but let's discuss the procedure that involves 3 caregivers. So first, what we do is we explain the patient the whole procedure. And then we move the beds together, close together. The levels of the beds have to be equal and also have to be adjusted to the hip area of like a thigh area of the shortest caregiver. Also, the head of the beds, both of them should be put in horizontal position, as well as railings of all beds have to be put down. Also, brakes on the beds has to be locked, and we can start the procedure. So we have 1 caregiver on one side of the bed from which the patient will be moving, and 2 caregivers sitting on top of the bed where the patient is going to be moved. So what's happening is we have a patient that laying on the flat sheet, and the caregiver who is on one side is ready and the two other caregivers, they're ready with the transfer board. So the caregiver, who is the one on the other side, he rolls the patient front to back weight movement towards himself, and two caregivers with the board, they use that to slide the board right under the patient. And then when it's done, that caregiver, the one caregiver, moves the patient back to the supine position. And at this point, the patient has to be fully on the board. We want to make sure that patient's feet are on the board. And at this point, we also can put the pillow under patient's head for comfort. So now we have a patient that's laying on the sheet, a flat sheet, and underneath is a board. So the next thing we do, two caregivers, they're sitting on the bed, holding the sheet, and another caregiver on the other side, he is ready and dedicated count. They all work as a team, and one of them pushes the patient away from him on the normal length of his arms, and those two who are sitting on the bed, they pull the sheet towards them. They have to keep their elbows close to their bodies, and now we have a patient that is laying on the board and sheet right in the middle of two beds. Now those two caregivers who were sitting on the bed, they go down, they stand on the floor, they're still holding the sheet, and the other caregiver is ready on the other side, he's holding onto the board. So we need a next move to finish transfer the patient to the next bed. So on dedicated count again, the team works together. Those two people pulling the patient towards themselves on the sheet, and the opposite side caregiver, he pulls the board towards himself. So this way the patient comfortably sliding in the middle of the second bed. So sometimes a little bit of adjustment needed in order for patient to be placed right in the middle of the bed. But this is pretty much, the transfer is complete, and caregivers did their job.